Reversing course on the border, we delve into the lingering local impact. It's a week of mourning in the metro, plus by big margins, voters greenlight extending the streetcar. But why is the stop sign now up on construction of the new-look KCI? Also this week, is this the next mayor of Kansas City? And is Kobach helped or hurt as a judge votes down the Kansas voting law and orders him back to law school?
Week in Review is made possible through the generous support of Dave and Jamie Cummings, Bob and Marlise Gorley, Smithfield Foods, Haas and Wilkerson Insurance, the Courtney S. Turner Charitable Trust, John H. Mize and Bank of America N.A. co-trustees, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
I'm Nick Haynes. Those stories and more straight ahead on the program that connects the dots on the news of the week in this place we call home. Going behind the week's headlines, the Star's chief political correspondent, Brian Lowry, and Pitch contributing reporter, Barbara Shelley, columnist and Star editorial writer, Dave Helling, and from KCUR-FM, the host of Up to Date, Steve Kraske. Well, the biggest national news story of the week was the president reversing course on a policy separating families at the border.
We don't like to see families separated. At the same time, we don't want people coming into our country illegally. This takes care of the problem.
Despite the president's shift, two new national polls show that a majority of Republicans agreed with the policy. But what about here? Kansas 3rd District Congressman Kevin Yoder leading the charge among Republican leaders condemning the practice. More than 100 demonstrators gathered outside the local office of Missouri Senator Roy Blunt, even after he declared he was opposed to separating families at the border. Now, I happen to have a campaign mailing. This is actually from Kevin Yoder this week. I don't know if you've ever seen one as large as this. It's pretty extensive. But Brian Lowry, in big letters in here, stop illegal immigration, secure our border, defend our homeland. What changed for Kevin Yoder? Why was he leading the charge against the policy?
I don't know that he's changed on that status, but I think if you look at prior to this week where he became very outspoken, he was getting a lot of criticism on social media for not doing more on this family separation issue, which would just really hit people at a gut level. I think like he posted something on Father's Day, and all these people were sending him messages criticizing him. He was in a position of power because he had become chairman of the subcommittee that has budget oversight over Homeland Security. So then Monday, he made much clearer where he stood on this issue with his letter to Attorney General Sessions, and then he actually met with the Secretary of Homeland Security the following day. It was a meeting that was pre-scheduled, but they did talk about this policy, and Yoder's office they seemed to take some credit on Wednesday, suggesting that meeting may have helped at least a little move the needle. But this was a situation where I think you saw Republicans from across the region, Roy Blunt, Pat Roberts, Jerry Moran, everyone was coming out against this
But not
policy.
everybody. I didn't see any comments from Sam Graves. Vicky Hartzler certainly wasn't against this. And I also noticed that Josh Hawley was condemning the position of Claire McCaskill on this.
Right, I noticed that as well. And yeah, I was a little curious about Josh Hawley. He seems to be pretty much sticking with Trump right now on everything. I kind of don't know if I would describe Congressman Yoder as leading the charge, because it did take him a while. I mean, he was going with the president's position as recently as 1 week ago, and then he switched.
Now, Yoder also comes under fire at a youth forum featuring Parkland High School survivors in Kansas City, Kansas this week as well.
But I wanted to mention that in this district, Kansas 03, Kevin Yoder has received thousands of dollars from the NRA, so we should vote him out.
One team claiming the turnout of around 1,500 people is a sign that Yoder may be vulnerable this election. Really, though, Steve?
Oh, I think he is. I've called him the most vulnerable incumbent in the metro this time around. Having said that, Nick, you got to beat somebody with somebody. The Democrats are going to have to put up a candidate who can knock off a well-financed, strong incumbent like Kevin Yoder this fall. But yeah, given the lay of the land with President Trump, how closely divided the 3rd District is, it that narrowly went for Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump in 2016 by a single point. I think all those dynamics begin to suggest that, yeah, in fact, the congressman is vulnerable.
While we talk about the political dynamics of this, we also saw an editorial in the Kansas City Star this week saying there was a local connection also to the border story, and that some of the children who were separated from parents or guardians there at the border headed to Topeka and are in a facility in Topeka, Dave.
Right, and as a matter of fact, more stories are now emerging almost hourly that these refugees, these separated kids, are showing up in facilities across the country, New York, Virginia, some other places, mostly in places run by private organizations, and there's some concern that the standards of holding these kids may be different from place to place, and some kids may be getting mistreated. I do want to go back to Kevin Yoder very quickly, because if he is vulnerable at all in the 3rd District, Nick, it's on issues like guns, which in a suburban district is an issue, particularly with school shootings, and it's on issues like separating children from their parents, which again will have some resonance in a suburban district. So that's why I think you're seeing Yoder at least try to get out ahead of the curve on both of those. He was against bump stocks, for example, after the Parkland shooting, and he's taken some role on the immigration crisis precisely because those are the things that might hurt him the most.
You're going to see him really strike a moderate tone. In fact, you know, even though that event the other night was clearly intended to help put pressure on him, he put out a statement saying that he hopes students continue to have a voice on this issue. He didn't try to get overly defensive on that. He's really going to try and strike a moderate tone as he prepares for his Democratic opponent in the general.
It was a week for mourning in our metro. Thousands gather to remember 2 Wyandotte County deputies shot and killed during an inmate transfer.
Just take just one moment of silence to honor their sacrifices and the sacrifices of their families.
Another large crowd gathers at a church in Midtown, Kansas City for the funeral of fashion designer Kate Spade. And 3 area families make burial plans for their loved ones after they're shot and killed by Kansas City police, all in the same afternoon.
This is not easy for any officer. We have officers that, after situations like this, never come back to work.
Now, each of these lives have been the subject of wall-to-wall news reporting, but once the headlines subside, will their deaths bring about any change, whether our understanding of mental illness following the death of Spade, changes in protocol in the deaths of 2 sheriff's deputies, or in police deadly force policy after 3 citizens are gunned down, Steve?
Well, I think any time the spotlight, Nick, is placed on mental health and mental illness in our society, it's a good thing. Kate Spade's family coming out and talking about the private side of the fashion designer and sort of what she went through in her own life. Listen, the mental health system, everyone knows it's a mess. You can't get in to see psychiatrists. Insurance companies rule the roost in terms of how long someone can stay in a mental health institution when much longer stays typically are needed. Lots of improvements need to be made. Stories like this help in that direction.
But we don't see a raft of bills now going on in Missouri and in Kansas to try and address the issue of mental health, do we, Brian?
Well, right now both legislatures are not currently in session, so you're probably not going to see that. But no, it's neither state house has particularly focused on the issue of mental health, although that rhetoric of mental health does usually come up after incidents of violence or things like that.
Barbara.
Well, just to stick with the mental health thing for 1 minute, you know, Missouri and Kansas have consistently cut funding for mental health care and treatment over the years. Neither has expanded Medicaid, which would bring a whole lot more people under some kind of funding umbrella. But you asked, will anything change? You know, I think you know, law enforcement is all around this region is going to be tightening up their procedures for those prisoner transfers, which is what happened in Wyandotte County. Also think, you know, given the questions about the when the police killed the 2 men at Barney Alice Plaza, the police in Kansas City, they don't have body cameras. And I hope that discussion comes up again, because that would have resolved some of those questions, I think, as to what exactly happened.
But there was the death of the boy in Johnson County who was killed by police. He was apparently on is suicidal. Videotape is released of that, and yet it's still, people were divided even with that videotape. Some people not agreeing with the conclusions that the police reached.
Well, right, and we had the case in Olathe in which there was a response to a woman who was eventually shot and killed by police based on some interchange that may have involved mental illness. I mean, it's very clear, Nick, that both cases in Kansas City, both police shooting cases, Kansas City, Missouri, involve some aspect of a mental incapacity, and that will deserve great scrutiny. Now, we also wrote, and I think this is true, that anytime the police are involved in a shooting like that, there needs to be an independent review system, and there really isn't in Kansas City. The police investigate themselves, and in fact, that night we're sort of absolving themselves of doing anything wrong. We think, no, you need someone from the outside looking in to see what lessons might be learned in that case. And I think Barbara's right. That'll happen in Wyandotte County as well, to see if the prisoner transfer protocol is as good as it needs to be.
The results are finally in, and Kansas City voters say an overwhelming yes to extending the streetcar line to the plaza and onto UMKC. But any surprises in the election results, Steve?
Not a surprise at all, Nick. I think this was widely anticipated that this thing was going to pass. It passed by 75% of the vote, despite some effort from Westport business people and others to knock this thing down a notch. But it passed, and passed easily. People in this town hungry for this system to be extended further south.
And voters approving a sales tax, a property tax assessment, but there still needs to be quite a bit of federal money to make this fly, right?
Right, and they're not going to collect any of the money until there is some guarantee of federal assistance on the streetcar project, although one assumes that at least some preliminary planning might get underway so that if that money does come through, they're ready to go. But no one can hop on the streetcar anytime soon and get from Union Station South down to UMKC.
Barbara, on a previous show, you said there was quite a bit of opposition, though, to the streetcar election. Were you surprised then by the lopsided result on Election Day?
I was a little bit surprised about, how, well, the spread there. I still think that's a weird way to hold an election, these mail-in ballots. And I think, I still think a lot of people, it just wasn't on their screen.
Now, I thought there was a bill in the Missouri legislature at some point this past session to actually change the nature of these kinds of elections. Whatever happened to that, Brian?
I'm not sure what the status of that, but I do know that there's always people, every time you have a mail-in ballot, there's people who feel a little bit caught off guard. And I remember this was last year, and it was a streetcar-related election, and I got a phone call from someone who was like, the Star needs to do a story about how there's a secret election going on. And I said, well, no, there's not a secret election. There is it's not a secret. We've written some stories on it, but I think a lot of people do feel like if they're not going to the polls, if it's not on the ballot with other things, they do sometimes feel that they didn't maybe...
It was not a secret election, but you had to go through 37 hurdles to actually get to vote.
That's where you might get some legislative involvement, Nick, is not just in the voting process, but the whole idea of transportation development districts themselves might come under increasing scrutiny, in part because the drawing of the district is an arbitrary process, where the lines go, whether you're on this side of the street or the other. And I do think the Missouri legislators that I talk to have some interest in studying that, in part because the taxes in that TDD, sales tax, could get up to 12, 13 cents, depending on what else happens politically in Kansas City. That is an enormous lug in that community, despite the vote, and I think there will be some review of that.
While it's full steam ahead for the streetcar, the planes are still on the runway at KCI Airport. 8 months after voters said yes to a $1 billion plan for a new single terminal, the developers say Kansas City's biggest building project is facing delays. Edgemore revising plans for a planned opening in November 2021. Why, Steve?
Well, Edgemore just announced today, Nick, that the airport opening will be delayed by about a year into the fall of 2022. There's a series of reasons, Nick, here. One main one is that the number of gates has increased from 35 to 39, so the actual configuration of the airport has changed. That's reason number one. Reason number two is the council took a while to sort of hash out agreements with Edgemore. That process is still ongoing. Listen, this is a massive project. The fact that this thing has gotten pushed back a little bit shouldn't be a huge surprise to anybody.
But I saw some city councilmen expressing concern about this. Is this what we would expect on a large project, Barbara, or should there be a cause for alarm?
To me, it's what you'd expect on a project of this size and complexity. But, on the other hand, the City Council wants their constituents to know that they're still doing due diligence with this project, so they're on the case.
Dave.
2021 was always a bit aggressive anyway. The late part of 2021 was the original projection. That was going to be difficult to meet under any circumstances. A delay like this probably should be expected, but the other shoe is going to drop, Nick, here in the next couple of weeks. The voters were told that the new terminal would cost around $1 billion. That was the projection during the election. The price tag will almost certainly be much higher than that, in part because of the additional gates, in part because of the delay, in part because steel and aluminum costs more because of the Trump tariffs. I've heard rumors as high as $1.8 billion. Now that would really get people's attention.
Why would it get people's attention when we were told all the way through the campaign the voters weren't on the hook?
And they are not, and they would not be. And if it goes to $1.8 billion, the airlines and the passengers would pay the bill. Kansas City would not. But voters were told $1 billion. If that price is almost doubled in about 6 months, that will end up in your newspaper, I'll put it to you that way.
Did you hear about the story of the homeless woman, the landlord, the housing developer, and the politician? Well, we haven't yet either, but we will this upcoming Wednesday night as KCPT heads to the Plaza Library to tackle the issue of affordable housing.
How do you solve Kansas City's affordable housing crunch? KCPT is on a search for solutions. Join us for the Affordable Housing Fix, a televised town hall, Wednesday, June 27th at the Kansas City Plaza Library.
Looking forward to shaking your hand at the Plaza Library Wednesday night at 6. In other news this week, a federal judge permanently strikes down a Kansas law requiring voters show proof of citizenship when they register to vote. U.S. District Judge Julie Robinson ruling the law violated the Constitution and the National Voter Registration Act. The judge also ordered Secretary of State Chris Kobach to take 6 hours of additional legal education. He's promising to appeal. But does this ruling hurt or help his prospects when he's asking for the public support a few weeks from now in the Republican primary for Kansas governor, Brian?
Well, I think it hurts him because it gets his name out there. There's been plenty of Kobach news this week, and I think some people are getting fatigued with it. It certainly hurts him because this was really a stunning defeat. This was his signature policy. He crafted it. He championed it. He defended it in court, and he failed. The judge thoroughly rebuked him in that ruling. And there's the extra embarrassment of you need to go through very rudimentary courses on civil procedure. Anyone who had followed our trial coverage knows that Kobach constantly ran afoul of the rules of civil procedure during the 3-week trial. I'd also note that really, though, the biggest importance, which won't help him in November, is the fact that this now allows the Democrats, who were very stifled in doing their get out the vote effort of registering new voters and getting them to the polls in 2014, they're no longer going to have that barrier. So it does one thing in general for all of the candidates who are running in any race this November. It means that you have a much easier path towards identifying new voters and getting them to the polls.
I did notice in the Wichita Eagle there was one lawmaker in Kansas who looked at this verdict from this judge and said, wow, this is now going to tip him to vote for Kobach because of the overreach of a judge in this case. Steve, so
I'm not sure that will be the widespread reaction to this thing, Nick. I mean, can you spell the word humiliating here? A federal judge admonishing the Secretary of State, a lawyer himself, to go back to school and learn how to conduct himself in a courtroom as to basic courtroom procedures. This was an ugly moment. It was a humiliating moment, and I think that'll resonate with voters to some degree across the state.
Is there an upside to Chris Kobach?
Well, no. I mean, I think he's more in trouble for being ordered to take 6 hours of education and to pay a fine with taxpayer money. Those kind of things people understand. But there's an important part of this ruling, Nick, that hasn't gotten a lot of attention. The judge not only found that the Kobach plan violated federal law, she found it unconstitutional. Now, that raises the bar then for an appeal, because now we're talking about constitutional grounds. But it makes it slightly more likely that the U.S. Supreme Court might take the case if it's a constitutional question and not just one of the statute. So now that will happen long after the election. If it ever gets to the U.S. Supreme Court, it might be 2 years from now. But it does mean that there might be something for Kobach down the line in that regard.
Which I will note, that came up during the trial. During the trial, they showed video of a deposition that the ACLU conducted with Kobach, and where they grilled him about his meetings with Trump, where he was lobbying the Trump administration to pass new laws. And he acknowledged in that deposition that the intention of those laws was that if he loses at the district court level, which he did anticipate doing, and he loses at the Court of Appeals level, that then if it gets up to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court doesn't take up the case, this would be a way around it, is to change the National Voter Registration Act. Right. So he has been thinking all along about this case going all the way up to the Supreme Court, which raises the interesting question: if he's elected governor, is he the one who's going to argue this case at the Supreme Court?
Well, I hope not, because, I hope that the state of, if it gets to the Supreme Court, I hope the state of Kansas finds a different lawyer to litigate it, because that would be really humiliating.
Just 2 years ago, St. Louis Public Radio ran a story that started like this: let's get something out of the way. Missouri's lieutenant governor doesn't have a lot to do. The late Missouri Senator Tom Eagleton once quipped, the lieutenant governor's office is only good for standing at an office window and watching the Missouri River flow by. Well, if that is the case, why all the fuss this week about the decision by new Missouri Governor Mike Parson to name House Majority Leader Mike Kehoe as the state's new number 2? Missouri Democrats have filed suit to block the move. If the job has often been demeaned as inconsequential, why is this pick making front-page news, Steve?
Well, I think maybe because Governor Parson is signaling that he wants to use his lieutenant governor in a way maybe that other governors haven't before. Keep in mind, Nick, Governor Parson is a former lieutenant governor. He just came from that office and was roundly ignored by then Governor Eric Greitens. But, Mike Parson is new on the job here, taking on the huge responsibility of governing a very large state. And he has signaled pretty clearly that he wants Mike Kehoe, his new second banana here, to help him in the job of leading the state. Job number 1 very well may be passing this 10-cent a gallon gasoline tax that'll be on the ballot this November. Mike Kehoe is a former chairman of the Missouri Department of Transportation. So you begin to look at this whole thing as maybe a new opportunity for Governor Parson to more fully implement and use Mike Kehoe, a very widely respected guy, by the way, going forward.
We've often viewed, I said, lieutenant governors don't have much to do, but clearly in this recent issue with Eric Greitens, and a lieutenant governor plays a huge role. They become the governor. But people in Kansas, how many people in Kansas can name who the lieutenant governor is currently in the state of Kansas?
Probably not that many, but remember, we've got 2 states in this region, and both of them have seen a lieutenant governor become governor within the past 6 months. So it is an important job, and that's really why the Democrats in Missouri are suing here, is because there is always the possibility that the lieutenant governor, and as you guys noted on the editorial page not too long ago, is what would have happened in the Greitens scandal if there had been a Democratic, because Missouri is the rare state that elects them independently, and that's what the Democrats are arguing, that we don't have, there's not a specific phrase in the Constitution that lays out how you replace the lieutenant governor. They're calling for a special election. Missouri Democrats do not have, they only have 1 statewide office right now in Jefferson City with the auditor's office. So this would give them a chance at a second one, and that would put that person in a position to maybe run for governor someday, or maybe become governor sooner rather than later.
Well, as we know then, sometimes lesser offices can be the springboard for bigger election prizes. Often rumored as a possible presidential candidate is the former Secretary of State in Missouri, Jason Kander, now looking to replace Sly James as the mayor of Kansas City. That election happening next year, those reports just coming out. Is this for real, Dave?
Yes. And by the way, the report came out at kansascity.com. The Kansas City Star broke this story. Let's make sure that's on the record.
All righty.
And the fact is, and yes, and we'll take subscriptions here at the station if you'd like. The fact is that it is real, and that the announcement is likely relatively quickly. And it has stunned the political community in Kansas City, which began learning about this in the last 10 days. And it will certainly change the mayor's race in ways that are not completely clear yet, but are certainly going to happen.
There are 73,000 candidates already running for mayor of Kansas City, though many of them already members of the city council, Barbara. What does Jason Kander bring to the table that those other candidates do not have?
his name, the fact that he's very popular, his Twitter following, which is,
I'm assuming he lives in Kansas City, Steve.
Well, yes, I think that question will be looked at in the days to come. But he does bring something else that's really, really important in a race like this, Nick. He can raise money, and a lot of it, he can raise that money from across the breadth and width of the United States of America. That will give him an enormous advantage in a race like this.
He has been raising money for his organization, Let America Vote. And, I think the people that gave money, particularly substantial amounts, were giving money thinking this is a guy that's going to seek national office at some point, not run for mayor of Kansas City.
Well, perhaps, though, does he see this as a better springboard for the White House because he could say he was the head of a major urban area?
Well, one thing we should remind him, given former Governor Greitens,
use that list.
You can't use that donor list from Let America Vote. But it's probably at least more realistic. And whether it's the springboard, you would think that getting elected mayor in 2019 would rule you out of running for 2020, but I think a lot of people always were a little bit puzzled that the former Secretary of State was among the names of rumored 2020 aspirants. However, he's a young guy. He becomes mayor of Kansas City, theoretically. Then you can always run for U.S. Senate again, maybe have a rematch with Roy Blunt. And then you can always, right, the White House,
yes,
presumably, will always be there for Jason Kander to run.
He is the favorite if he gets into the race, I think. But if Kansas City voters think that he's using it only as a springboard to another office, he will lose. Because Kansas Cityans are very protective of their city council and their mayor, and they want someone in that office who is looking after their interests, not the interests of a political future. I think that'll be the threshold for Jason Kander. Some people will get out of the race because he's now in it, but he has to answer that question, and he has a year to do so.
And that is our Week in Review. Our thanks to our news reviewers keeping you up to date weekdays at 11 on KCUR-FM, Steve Kraske, and pitch contributing writer Barbara Shelley. From the pages of your Kansas City Star, Brian Lowry and Dave Helling. I'm Nick Haynes. From all of us here at KCPT, thanks for spending part of your weekend with us.